724. Romans. The explanation, O wretched man that I am, presents Paul now being brought to the place where he can receive help. He has exhausted all his own efforts, which work not at all. His condition forces him to cry out to God for help. It is unfortunate that most of us have to come to this place before help can be received. The battle and struggle is not necessarily in the strict sense of the word, but it does seem to be necessary for most of us, even as it was for the Apostle Paul. Man, even believers, must come to an end of themselves. In other words, the hope of the flesh must die in every respect. With no more hope left from that sector, we then cry out to God. To be sure, the word wretched adequately describes the situation. It is a Christian who does not have victory, but yet wants victory with all of his heart. It might even be possible for an individual who is being mightily used of God while all of this is going on, even as Paul. However, Paul had one great disadvantage that none of us have, at least in a sense. Even though this great plan of redemption, which provided for salvation from sin and victory over sin, had been gloriously and wondrously consummated by Jesus Christ and was now available to all, still, I am probably not exaggerating when I say that not one single person in the world had this segment of truth respecting this of what Jesus had done. Most likely it was Paul who was the first one to face this monster and also seek God until the answer came, which is given to us here. And yet I am not so certain that if that was a disadvantage at all. Most of the time, other believers can be of little help, most of the time, and much of the time, even harm. Blessed is the believer who does have the privilege of having someone join with him in seeking God, and maybe, hopefully, one who knows the great truths of these chapters. Sadly, those are few and far between. In fact, if Paul had been a member of some modern Pentecostal denominations, the chances are great that he would have been unceremoniously drummed out of that particular organization. They could hardly afford to have had someone in their ranks, irrespective as to the call of God on his life or how much God was using him, who had obvious failure. Thank God that albatross did not then exist. The question, who shall deliver me from the body of this death, presents a wail of anguish and a cry for help. This was Paul's cry during the spiritual experience he was describing for himself in this chapter. Paul the saint, ignorant of the delivering power of the Holy Spirit, concerning whom he has so much to say in the next chapter. The minute he cries, "Who?" he finds the path to victory, for he calls upon the person for help. Actually, the Greek text is masculine, indicating a person. That person is Jesus. The words, "this death," refer to the miserable condition of the Christian who is yet dominated more or less by the evil sin nature over which all the while he is desiring to gain victory. It is the death Paul speaks of in verse 9. The body here is the physical body in which the sinful nature dwells and through which, when it is in control, it operates. Paul is not crying out for egress from his body, but for deliverance from the condition of defeat which his residence in his physical body makes a possibility, and his lack of spiritual knowledge up to that moment resulted in.